The air was thick with tension as Captain Nathaniel Quinn stared out of the viewport. The stars outside shimmered coldly, their light a stark contrast to the unease in his chest. Across the bridge, Elena Torin, his most trusted strategist, was bent over a terminal, her brow furrowed as she scrolled through the latest communication. The hum of the engines seemed louder than usual, but it was the flickering image on the screen that drew his attention. A child. The image was grainy, hastily transmitted. But it was unmistakable, an Ignari child, barely 5 years old, shackled and surrounded by armored guards. Her face was streaked with dirt and tears, eyes wide with fear as the announcement blared from the speakers. The Galactic Council has decreed the execution of the child of Ignar. There will be no trial. No appeal. Nathaniel's fists clenched at his sides, his pulse quickening. The Ignari, a peaceful species from a remote planet, had been accused of crimes they did not commit, their innocent young now paying the price for the Council's manipulation. The words were cold, calculated. And they sent a clear message: the Council rules with unchallenged authority. Elena looked up from the terminal, meeting Nathaniel's eyes. "We can't just stand by, can we?" Her voice was steady, but her gaze was unwavering, filled with the same fire that burned in Nathaniel's heart. "No," Nathaniel said, his voice low but resolute. "We can't. This is it. We act now, or the galaxy falls deeper into their hands." His words echoed in the command center as the crew, gathered in silence, processed the gravity of what lay ahead. The Ignari child's fate was now tied to their own. This was no longer just an injustice, it was a call to arms. The Galactic Council had made a grave mistake, and Nathaniel would not let it go unchallenged. Marcus Hayes, the youngest of the crew, strode forward, his eyes alight with anger. "We can't just rescue her and run. We need to make them pay for this. We're talking about an entire species, their children slaughtered in cold blood." Elena raised a hand, her voice firm. "Marcus, we will save her. But we do this with a plan. We don't rush in blindly. The Council has their eyes everywhere." Nathaniel took a deep breath. Elena was right. Rash decisions had cost them before. They had to be smarter, more strategic this time. But as he looked out at the stars again, he knew this mission would not only change the fate of the Ignari child, it would shift the balance of power in the galaxy. If humanity could strike a blow against the Council, others would follow. He turned to his crew. "We leave in 1 hour. Get ready. We're going to Veritas." The hum of the shuttle's engines filled the quiet as the crew prepared for their mission. Nathaniel's mind raced through the plans they'd devised, but he couldn't shake the image of the Ignari child. How many others were out there, waiting for someone to stand up for them? Elena was at the controls, her fingers moving quickly over the holographic interface. Marcus sat behind Nathaniel, nervously checking weapons. But it was the child's face, still flickering on the calm screen, that drove them all forward. "This won't be easy," Nathaniel said, his voice steady. "The Council doesn't make mistakes like this. We're going in blind, and they won't let us leave without a fight." Marcus glanced up, his youthful face hardening with resolve. "Then let's make sure they remember who we are." Nathaniel looked at him, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. "They will." The shuttle lurched into motion, heading toward Veritas, where destiny awaited. The shuttle pierced through the atmosphere of Veritas, its engines humming with quiet power as it descended toward the icy surface below. Outside the viewport, the sprawling metropolis shimmered in the distance, its towering structures built into the jagged, frozen cliffs. It was a world of paradox, an advanced society with technology that rivaled the best of the galaxy, yet their heartless cruelty toward the innocent left a bitter taste in Nathaniel's mouth. Beside him, Elena adjusted the shuttle's course with practiced precision. Her expression was stoic, but Nathaniel could feel the intensity in her gaze, the same tension that gnawed at him. She was as determined as he was, but even she could not shake the weight of what they were about to do. They had crossed a line. No turning back now. The crew was silent, each person lost in their own thoughts. Marcus sat in the rear cabin, checking weapons and adjusting the tactical gear strapped to his body. Despite the young man's enthusiasm, Nathaniel knew this mission would be harder than any of them expected. Marcus had the heart of a warrior, but the Council was no ordinary foe. The stakes were far higher now. "How are we looking?" Nathaniel asked, breaking the silence. His voice was steady, but it was hard to ignore the storm brewing in his gut. "We're on track," Elena replied, her fingers moving across the holographic control panel. "No signs of Council interference yet. But we're on a tight window. Once we land, we'll have only a few hours before they realize we're here." "Understood," Nathaniel said. He glanced back at Marcus. "You ready?" Marcus grinned, his youthful energy a stark contrast to the tense atmosphere. "Always, Captain. They won't know what hit them." Nathaniel's lips twitched into a half-smile, but his thoughts remained on the child they had come to save. She was not just another victim, she was a symbol. If they succeeded here, the entire galaxy would know that humanity was not to be underestimated. The Council's stranglehold on the galaxy was weakening, and they would be the ones to shatter it. As the shuttle neared the ground, Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. The city below was quiet, its streets eerily devoid of activity. It seemed too peaceful, too controlled. The Council's forces were likely waiting in the shadows, ready to stamp out any resistance before it could grow. But the crew of the Valor was not here to retreat. The shuttle made a smooth landing in a secluded courtyard, its engines roaring for a brief moment before falling silent. Nathaniel opened the hatch, and cold air rushed in, sharp against his skin. He could feel the weight of the mission settling over him like a cloak. Elena was the first to move, stepping out into the icy landscape, her boots crunching against the snow. Nathaniel followed, Marcus close behind. The city around them seemed almost deserted, the streets empty except for a few distant figures moving in the shadows. It was too quiet. The calm before the storm. "This way," Elena said, her voice clipped as she led them toward an underground entrance. She had done her homework, and the coordinates they had acquired led them straight to an old maintenance tunnel beneath the city, far from the prying eyes of the Council's enforcers. As they moved deeper into the tunnel system, the darkness grew thicker, the walls closing in around them. The only light came from the flickering glow of their helmets. Nathaniel's heart pounded in his chest, not from fear, but from the anticipation of what was to come. Elena glanced back at him. "We're about to cross a line we can't uncross." Nathaniel nodded, his voice resolute. "I know. But if we don't do this, no one else will." They reached a door at the end of the tunnel, heavy and reinforced. The markings on it were unmistakable, the Council's seal. Elena tapped a few commands into the door's security panel, and after a few tense seconds, it slid open. The child was waiting inside. Nathaniel's eyes locked on her small form, shackled to the wall, trembling but defiant. She looked up at them, her eyes filled with both fear and hope. This was why they had come. This was where everything changed. "We're here to get you out," Nathaniel whispered, his voice barely audible over the roar of his own heartbeat. The real battle had only just begun. The doors slid shut behind them with a mechanical hiss, cutting off the last vestiges of daylight. Nathaniel took a steadying breath, his boots clicking softly on the cold, metal floor as he stepped toward the small figure shackled to the wall. The faint hum of the facility echoed in the background, an unsettling reminder of the Council's pervasive reach. But that didn't matter now. They had come for her. The girl's eyes met his with a mixture of fear and something else, hope. Nathaniel hesitated for a brief moment. She was no older than 12, her face pale and gaunt from starvation or neglect, but her gaze was defiant. He knelt down in front of her, forcing himself to ignore the clanging sounds of metal doors and distant alarms as they began to echo through the complex. There wasn't time for hesitation now. "We're here to get you out," he said, his voice low, steady. The girl blinked up at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you human?" Nathaniel smiled grimly. "The last thing the Council expects." Behind him, Marcus stirred, his voice brimming with impatience. "Captain, we don't have time to chat. We need to move." Nathaniel shot him a quick look but nodded. Elena was already working on the girl's restraints, her movements precise and efficient. She'd been the one to research the facility, to track the child's movements and figure out a way inside. There was no room for mistakes. Every second they spent here meant more time for the council to notice their intrusion. But Elena's focus remained unbroken. She managed to deactivate the shackles with a soft click, her hands steady despite the tension filling the room. The girl winced but didn't make a sound. "Thank you," the girl whispered, her eyes welling with tears. Nathaniel gave a small nod before standing, offering his hand to the girl. "You're safe now." The girl hesitated, looking between him and the open door. "I don't understand. Why would you help me?" "The council, they said I'm nothing. That I'm broken." Elena turned, her voice sharp with conviction. "The council's wrong. You're not broken. You're a person. And we're going to make sure you stay that way." The girl met Elena's gaze, uncertainty still flickering in her eyes. But then, slowly, she reached out and took Nathaniel's hand. Suddenly, the alarms blared louder, their shrill cry echoing through the walls. Nathaniel's heart stuttered in his chest, adrenaline flooding his veins. They were out of time. "We need to move." "No," he barked. Marcus was already at the door, his weapon drawn. "We've got company coming." Nathaniel didn't wait for any more words. He grabbed the girl's arm gently but firmly, pulling her toward the exit. Elena followed closely, her own weapon ready. They had no illusions about what was coming. This mission wasn't going to end quietly. As they moved through the dimly lit corridors, the soft hiss of air vents and the faint clanking of boots echoed from somewhere up ahead. The council's soldiers were closing in. Nathaniel's mind raced, calculating their options. They were outnumbered, but this wasn't a fight they could afford to lose. "You stay close," Nathaniel told the girl, his voice unwavering. "Do exactly as we say, and you'll be fine." She nodded, squeezing his hand tightly. Suddenly, the corridor ahead erupted with blinding light, and a group of council soldiers rounded the corner, their weapons raised. Marcus reacted first, unleashing a series of precise shots that sent two of the soldiers sprawling to the floor. Elena dove behind a nearby column, returning fire with deadly accuracy. Nathaniel's heart pounded in his chest as he yanked the girl behind him, shielding her with his body as a storm of bullets whizzed past. They were trapped, but Nathaniel refused to let them fall here. "Not now. We need a way out," Elena shouted, firing again to suppress the enemy. "I've got it," Marcus grunted, pulling a small device from his belt and activating it. The hallway ahead exploded in a flash of fire as an EMP grenade sent the soldiers' weapons into disarray. "Go, go!" Nathaniel shouted. He pushed the girl forward, the team falling in behind her. The path was clear, but they weren't safe yet. They still had to make it back to the shuttle, and the council would stop at nothing to keep them from leaving. As they ran, the girl looked up at Nathaniel with wide eyes. "You'll keep me safe, won't you?" Nathaniel's heart tightened. "I swear it," he said, his voice low and determined. But even as he said it, he knew that promise would be tested in ways none of them could predict. The ship's engines hummed as they tore through the darkness of space, the harsh light of distant stars flickering outside the viewport. Nathaniel's fingers tightened around the armrest, his mind racing despite the stillness around him. The mission had been successful, but the danger was far from over. They'd rescued the girl, but now they were on the run. The council wouldn't let them go so easily. Elena's voice crackled through the comms. "They've already started tracking us. We've got maybe a few minutes before they pinpoint our location." Nathaniel glanced over his shoulder at the girl sitting in the seat behind him. She was staring at the viewport, her face pale, her eyes distant, as if she was still trying to process everything that had happened. The fear was still there, lurking beneath the surface. He couldn't blame her. They had all been changed by this mission, but she, in particular, had been thrown into a nightmare. "Can you feel it?" Elena's voice broke through his thoughts. "The council's going to come for us with everything they have. This isn't going to be easy." Nathaniel gritted his teeth, his jaw tight. "We don't have a choice." He turned to face the girl, taking in her fragile form. She had been through more than anyone her age should endure, and yet, there was a quiet strength in her eyes. A flicker of something that made him believe she wasn't as helpless as she seemed. "What's your name?" She looked up at him, surprised by the question. Her voice was soft, almost inaudible. "I don't remember." Nathaniel nodded, understanding that the trauma of the past days, maybe even years, had stripped away pieces of her past. "You're safe now. I promise." The girl didn't respond, but Nathaniel could feel the weight of her gaze on him. His promise felt heavy, more than he'd ever imagined. They had no idea what the council would do to stop them, but he knew it wouldn't be pretty. "Brace yourselves." Marcus's voice sounded from the cockpit. "We've got incoming fighters. They're coming in fast." The ship rocked as a volley of laser fire slammed into the shields, shaking the hull with each impact. The girl gasped, her grip tightening on the seat. Nathaniel's heart pounded in his chest, but he didn't have time to react. They were in the thick of it now. "Pull up, Elena!" "Hard right!" Nathaniel shouted, his voice sharp with urgency. Elena's hands flew over the controls, her movements precise and practiced. The ship banked hard to the right, narrowly avoiding a blast that would have torn them apart. Through the viewport, Nathaniel could see the enemy fighters, sleek and dark, darting in and out of view, their weapons trained on them. Marcus's voice echoed through the comms, his tone grim. "I'm not sure how much longer we can keep this up. We need to lose them or we're toast." Nathaniel's mind raced. He couldn't lose another team member. He wouldn't. "We're not going down." "Not today." The girl glanced toward the cockpit, her eyes wide. "What do we do? How can we stop them?" Nathaniel turned, meeting her gaze. "We'll make it out. Trust me." Her hands gripped the armrest tighter. She was scared, he could see it, but there was something else there, something fierce. For a moment he saw the girl she could become, not just a victim, but a fighter. He turned back to the cockpit. "Can we lose them in the asteroid field up ahead?" he asked, his voice steady. "We'll try," Elena answered. "Hold on." She veered the ship toward a nearby asteroid belt, weaving through the dense cluster of rock and debris. The sound of their ship's engines hummed as it dodged obstacles, the proximity of asteroids making every turn a risk. It was their best chance to evade the enemy, but the clock was ticking. The Council would send more reinforcements. They needed a plan, and they needed it fast. Suddenly, a loud crash rang through the ship, followed by the violent shaking of the hull. One of the fighters had found its mark. The ship lurched, throwing everyone forward in their seats. Nathaniel's heart skipped a beat as he saw sparks flying from the console, the control systems flickering. "Elena! Status!" Nathaniel barked, barely holding on as the ship continued its chaotic dance through the field. "I'm trying to stabilize it." Elena grunted, sweat beading on her forehead. "But the port engine's down. We're not going to have enough power for evasive maneuvers." Marcus swore loudly. "We need to do something, or this is the end." Nathaniel's mind raced. There was no time for hesitation. "Everyone to the weapons bay. Now! Are you crazy?" Elena shouted, but Nathaniel was already unstrapping himself. "I'm not giving up on us yet," he said firmly. "Get to the weapons bay. We're going to make this count." The girl looked at him, her eyes wide but no longer as terrified. She was starting to understand. She was part of this now. She wasn't alone. Nathaniel turned toward the door, his hand hovering over the controls. They had one shot. And he was going to make it count.